Today I have with me the President of the Democratic Labour Party, Ms. Verla De Peiza. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So we are here today and we're going to be discussing what, as the President of the Democratic Labour Party, what are your thoughts on the response to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic?
The Democratic Labour Party's response is that we did need to have some sort of stimulus if it is that we were going to reopen the economy. Our concern is primarily that we seem to think that we are going to be reopening with business as usual. And that is to say that we are looking to put the bulk of the focus on tourism when everything that we can see happening globally suggests that we need to be taking this opportunity to restructure our economy away from that heavy dependence on tourism. The point being that our two major tourist source markets are also two of the countries that are significantly impacted by COVID, that have shut their economies, whose people are on the breadline. Their unemployment rates are skyrocketing. The UK is in a slightly better position than the US because they have taken a decision to furlough their workers as a national policy. So government is paying workers 60% of their earnings, but you would understand that at 60% of your earnings, discretionary spending is the thing that goes out through the window first. Also, the economies that could function, the businesses that could function in a shutdown have discovered that they function well remotely. So we now have Zoom, like we are using right now, taking over in relation to business transactions, and FaceTime is being used as well. Google Meet has stepped up to the plate. Facebook is looking to push into that market as well. So what we are seeing is that not only will discretionary travel in terms of leisure travel be impacted going forward, but that business travel is going to look different in the future. And I think with those realities in mind, that we need then to be more focused on taking the opportunity of this crisis to reshape our economy away from the dependence on tourism. So when we have that stimulus package that is so heavily weighted towards tourism, then I am concerned that we are not taking realities into account, and we are not looking to improve, learn the lessons of COVID and improve the society for a greater number of persons.
And just to follow on from that last point that you would have made as it relates to tourism and our heavy dependence, what then would be the Democratic Labour Party's advice to government as it relates to where the country should be looking coming out of COVID-19 away from a tourism dependent society?
Okay, Kobie, I think I need to share with you at the end of this the text of the Errol Barr Memorial Lecture back in January, because we did already signal as a party the direction in which we're looking to go. We don't envisage a Barbados that does not have tourism as a revenue earner, but we recognized from our own deliberations and our market research that tourism was benefiting such a small number of persons, and also was so heavily dependent on factors and indicators outside of our control that Barbados needed to have a diversified economy that was not so heavily dependent on tourism. In 2007, 2008, when it was a world recession, we knew from all back then, and a matter of fact, we knew from before then, because that was not the first shock externally to our economy that saw our tourism plunge. And COVID again is an exacerbation of the 2007, 2008 position. And even though it was a position in 2007, 2008, the recovery of tourism was not until sometime around 2015, 2016 that we started to see the improvement in the numbers, because people had to get back not only a job, but they had to get back confidence that they could spend their savings in a discretionary way and still have rainy day savings set aside. Right now, people are cutting into their rainy day savings, so their discretionary spending is not the same. And we are concerned from all back then. January sounds like a long time ago, but it is really a whole lifetime ago, because nothing that is happening now was really in our contemplation in January. But still, we were already promoting changing the face of our revenue earning streams to include more than just tourism. Sugar being seasonal and declining, we were interested in having different avenues for earning that also created different opportunities for our people to be a part of that revenue earning perspective.
Okay, and as it relates to some of the, going back to when you talked about the stimulus package, as it relates to some of the measures outlined, we would have seen the opposition leader voice some concern as it relates to tapping into the Catastrophe Fund. This was something that was also done by a previous administration as well. What are your thoughts as it relates to the use of the money for the Catastrophe Fund, as well as some of the other measures outlined in that stimulus package to get Barbados back on track?
Two of the other measures that cause us concern are the Catastrophe Fund, but more so the bond, the proposed bond issue. In relation to the Catastrophe Fund, I view it slightly differently. The Democratic Party views it slightly differently. This is a catastrophe. What concerns us is that the use of the Catastrophe Fund is being leveraged against the possibility or likelihood of a hurricane, which I think makes it a different consideration. I am not going to make any statement about the apparent duplicitous nature of when in opposition opposing the use of the Catastrophe Fund and when in government making use of the Catastrophe Fund. I hold the view that COVID meets the criteria, though not the stated, it was not in the contemplation at the time of the legislation. It was more in terms of hurricanes and earthquakes, and that was what was in contemplation. But there's no doubt that COVID has impacted us in a catastrophic way. And the only concern that I have is not that you're using the Catastrophe Fund, but you're looking to leverage that against having inserted in our external credit agreements that we will have fiscal space, I believe, of 2 years if we do suffer a natural disaster. Again, that clause does not contemplate a pandemic, so we can't invoke the clause for this. But if we do have a hurricane, the thinking seems to be that we would then be able to replace the monies from what we have used in the Catastrophe Fund from what we are saving in relation to that clause, but failing to acknowledge upfront that if we do have a natural disaster, we will need to be applying our savings to that remedy. And it would not in any way ameliorate what we are doing now. So I think if you're going to use the Catastrophe Fund, use it, but don't be using as a selling point that we have a clause inserted in the contracts with our external creditors, because I think that gives a false impression that one can play off the other when that is not the case. Acknowledge upfront that what we are experiencing now does not fit within the parameters of the legislation. However, I don't think anybody would critique negatively that what we are going through right now is catastrophic and use the fund in that manner. But don't be looking to leverage one against the other.
And it would
in relation, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask in relation to the business aspect of it. I would have seen your spokesperson on business, Ryan Walters, make a claim or plea to government to assist small businesses as they recover from COVID. And I would have seen you made a statement as it relates to that also being included in the stimulus package. So I'm just going to ask you to comment on that.
Well, absolutely, we are on all fours with anything that is being done to assist small businesses. I hold the view that small business and entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship could also be medium-sized and it could be large as well, is a key to the diversification of our economy. It is not the only key, but it is a key to the diversification of our economy. A lot of small businesses are not just one-man enterprises, but they are employers who have employees, and they need to be propped up. In a different forum, a query was raised as to why the government would offer stimulus to persons who did not pay to the NIS fund in any capacity. I hold the view, though, that COVID is a learning experience, not only for government, but for businesses and for individuals as well. And one of the lessons to be learned that has been learned, I am sure, is how you would be able to cope without a pension. These last 6 weeks will have brought home in a significant way to self-employed persons the lifeline that national insurance provides in the long run. It also should have the architects of the scheme also in contemplation of having a component for unemployment for self-employed persons, because one of the reasons why self-employed persons have been reticent about paying into the fund is that there really is not much benefit outside of pension. But now we know that pension is not the only thing that we should be able to look forward to, and that the inability to work can come in different forms. So I support, even though it is not to the same level, I support having a stimulus of some sort for those persons who never paid into the fund, so long as you're collecting the information that is critical now to allow them to be brought under the scheme, so that going forward they can and should pay into the national insurance scheme. Now, let them come forward to qualify for the $500 a month for the 2 months, but take the relevant information from them so that, and this is on both sides, so that there can be greater efficiencies in the national insurance scheme, and also so that those persons who were not contributing before will learn that lesson that it could have been 1,500 times 2, were I paying into the fund, and have that conversation more in terms of learning now as opposed to any form of punishment, but a learning exercise, and have a campaign now targeting self-employed persons who would not have appreciated, and I know some who called me flabbergasted and upset that they could not qualify for unemployment benefits, and having their businesses grind to a halt, still having families to support, and in large measure being sometimes the sole breadwinner of a household. And we know in Barbados that impacts in a gender way as well, in terms of women being sole or primary breadwinners in households. So in terms of the stimulus for small businesses, I am satisfied and happy to lead the Democratic Labour Party's support in relation to that. I'm glad that the government listened, and we're sure we're not the only ones who were making that an issue, but we're pleased that the government listened and that self-employed persons are being included in the stimulus package.
And coming out of the stimulus package as well, too, it was briefly spoken about just before, but also again during that presentation, would have been the Investment Council, which is headed by former prime ministers, ministers of finance, and other persons of prominence or who have that background. the Investment Council has been set up to chart a new way of how I'm guessing we invest, or how we look for revenue generation methods in Barbados. What is the party's position on the Investment Council that has been set up?
The Jobs and Investment Council, its parameters are not fully ventilated in the public space right now. So offering critique is difficult from that point of view. The different groupings that were mentioned in the Prime Minister's speech suggest that they're weighted towards the creation of jobs, and this is in recognition of the fact that 30,000 plus persons have registered for unemployment. We don't know, we haven't been told how many have applied for severance, which I think is a better indicator of long-term unemployment, given that both the Attorney General and Government Information Service actively discouraged companies from going the route of vacation, which left them with no option besides layoff, really. And the issue of the layoff certificate would trigger an unemployment claim. That does not necessarily mean that these are persons who are long-term out of work. So without being able to lean and compare with the severance applications, those would be the persons who have completely lost their employment, as opposed to those who only temporarily lost their employment. It is difficult really to say with any certainty what the long-term unemployment prospects are, but some measure of job creation would be necessary in order to keep the economy flowing. Persons who are unemployed cannot meet their obligations, starting with rent and mortgage, but continuing all the way down to being able to support their families, and of course being active participants in the economy, the turnover of the economy, and of course as well being reliant on the state for support. So I can see why the Jobs and Investment Council would be set up. The concern for me is that it is not ministerially led, given that we are in a position where we have a top-heavy cabinet, and we also have the cabinet sitting alongside a slew of consultants, including one who carries the title plenipotentiary. I would have thought that that structure would have been used, in particular given the size of the economic team. I wonder the juxtaposition with the bringing back of the former ministers of finance, and how the economic team and the former finance ministers would gel in terms of what the proposals are, because we now have a third layer. We have the ministers, we have the consultants, and now we have that body that is set up. So that is the concern of the Democratic Labour Party. It is now not just a duplication, but it's triplication, a word. But we now have a third layer doing what we suspect may well be the same job description, because I would expect that ministers would be looking to devise policy, that consultants would also be looking to influence policy, and now we have another policy initiative grouping that has been set up. And that is our concern.
Okay, and as it relates to education, the Democratic Labour Party would have made significant statements as it relates to the movement of education from the physical classroom onto the online classroom, particularly with the lack of equipment. Now, government has made an appeal saying that they need about 10,000 tablets and laptops to outfit everyone to make sure that they're on the G Suite, the Google Classrooms platform. What is the position of the party now as we have started the Trinity term on May 4th, and how that will go as the term progresses?
The education does make you take a deep breath and then let it out very, very slowly. Again, let me start with the point of reference of the Errol Barr Memorial Lecture in January, because again, we were promoting radical change to education from as early as that. And in all fairness, the week after the Errol Barr Memorial Lecture, the Minister of Education, I would have to say signaled, because she wasn't really speaking in terms of the common entrance at the time, but she signaled the intention to remove the common entrance. What COVID has done, though, is brought into sharp focus the inefficiencies of our existing education system. Now, way back a whole generation, maybe a generation and a half ago, our present Prime Minister, as Minister of Education, introduced a policy called EduTech, and there was a drive at that point to put laptops in the hands of students. I recall the Alexandra School being the pilot project, but that fizzled. Under the last administration, not by way of, well, let me start with the government policy first. I'm aware that sometime around 2009, 2010, teachers were issued with laptops. And through I'll probably get this name wrong, and I do apologize, but I believe it is the Aaron and Christine Trust Foundation. Tablets were distributed at the class 4 level in primary schools. And the intention was, in some measure, to move towards introducing technology to schools. In terms of the secondary schools, that same foundation used Harrison College as a template and outfitted a classroom for the use of technology in learning. I read and I heard the critique of Aaron Trust in relation to what the response was, and it was not heartening. So what we have found now is that COVID has rushed us forward to something that we were dragging our feet on for decades, literally decades. It has rushed us to that point. The number 10,000 is sobering, though, and it speaks to the fact that our present education model has not in any way addressed social inequalities. We still have persons who cannot access education because they don't have electricity, they do not have internet access, they do not have a device that is conducive to the software that is being used, maybe a combination of all three. So what we have then is a very large subset of our society that will fall through the cracks if we have to continue with online learning for any extended period of time. 10,000 is a really large number, and we need to speed up our delivery of service to them. I believe under the last administration, there was an initiative as well to bring Wi-Fi first to Bridgetown, and I think the intention was to make it an island-wide drive. As far as I'm aware, that project is not complete either, and I don't know that this administration had made any steps towards furthering it. So COVID has pushed everything forward, and we were not ready, we are not ready, but I don't think that we can drag our feet anymore. To do so would be a disservice to the country. But for me, what it points, these 10,000 persons who don't have that equipment, were likely disadvantaged under the traditional system too, with assignments requiring research online in large measure, that you submit the assignments in printed form. We probably had, and we were not taking note of the fact that we had students who were not being serviced by our traditional education system, and it is now brought into sharp focus with the COVID environment that our education system does not face the 21st century in any way at all. The ministry has a lot of teething problems. The last set of correspondence coming out of the ministry and the response coming from the unions suggests that the expectations also are perhaps too high at this point in time and may not be taken into account student realities, teacher realities. And I believe that whilst we need to press ahead with the introduction of technology, we have to do so in a sensitive matter, especially taking on board that admission that 10,000 of our students, 10,000, that is a large slice of our population of students. No matter what the spread is, it is way more than we can afford to have of persons dropping through our education cracks. So the Democratic Labour Party, we had our own drive to reclaim tablets and laptops in order to pass them on to students, and we were doing that on an individual basis. As we received equipment, we were identifying a child in need and handing it over, and we will continue to do that. The difference is that we're not calling a press conference and doing it, because at the end of the day, we have to be sensitive to how individuals feel about receiving what is in essence a charitable donation, and we have to be aware of those sensibilities as well. But we are definitely a part of that drive to ensure that our young people are equipped to receive education going forward. I hope that the COVID experience is not a temporary experience in terms of the use of technology, and that the Ministry of Education embraces this change for the future. It may not be, I don't envisage that we will be giving up the physical classroom in its entirety, but certainly if and when schools start back and we are still under conditions of social distancing, then there will have to be some element of remote access, given that we already have overcrowded classrooms. And to reduce these sizes would either require a shuffling of the timetable or the hiring of more teachers or the application of remote access. So we hope that the lessons of COVID are lasting lessons going forward, and that we don't drop the ball again. And that is just a criticism across the board for Barbados, that we really did stagnate in our education delivery. And that was a point that was made in the Errol Barr Memorial Lecture, that we really needed to reshape our education to be useful to Barbados. Because we up all the way up to tertiary level, we were having persons who were complaining that having achieved the degree, they were not finding employment suitable. And so it was clear that there was a disconnect between what education was delivering and what Barbados required. And this is the appropriate time. We use it all the time, but we really need to apply it, that maxim that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. No, it is not the time to be propping up the status quo so much as disrupting the status quo and finding our new normal. And that is what the Democratic Labour Party is anxious to be a part of.
And finally, as you just made the point, a crisis is nothing to be wasted. What is the party's vision for Barbados post COVID-19? What else do you want to see revolutionize or evolve to make this society better?
Again, I have to point to the Errol Barr Memorial Lecture, because all back in January, we were signaling that Barbados needed a brand new direction. And it was, as I said earlier, in terms of revenue generation, that we needed to stop being so dependent on tourism, that we needed to find ways to have persons meaningfully involved in the economy, and not just as consumers and employees, but as movers and shakers. And the platform, we believe, was set in terms of a shift towards renewable energy, in terms of how we deal with our garbage, because I am convinced that garbage is a business and we are missing out on that opportunity, in terms of reshaping our education. So it's not just about revenue, it is, and it really is about our people, and we have to get back to having our people at the core of our policy delivery. And once we keep people as our focus, then I think that we will be headed in the right direction. It can't be that the business trumps people and the economy subsumes social considerations. We have to find that balance that makes our citizens feel comfortable and appreciated and a part of what is happening in a meaningful way. And that is the direction that the Democratic Labour Party wishes to be moving the country in.
Well, I want to thank you, Ms. De Peiza, for your time and your thoughts as it relates to some of the issues affecting Barbados now in this COVID-19 pandemic, and sharing what your party's vision is for the country. So I just want to thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me. I just wish we had more time, because there's so much that is going on in Barbados right now, and there's so much that needs to be going on as well. But there will be different opportunities to delve into the various aspects. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.